Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video. Now, obviously, the world is in a bit of a weird place at the minute with the whole coronavirus thing and the UK is on lockdown. So I thought what I would do is do something totally fucking irrelevant and just carry on with what I usually do, because why the fuck not? We've got plenty of time on our hands, so let's have it. From the title and thumbnail, you will know that I will be talking about the Big Finish audio series Cyberman, specifically the first series, because that's the only one that I've heard so far. For those of you who don't know, Big Finish obviously are an audio company. They do majority Doctor Who related content. This is kind of a spin-off series of Doctor Who because it doesn't feature the Doctor whatsoever. It doesn't feature any established Doctor Who character. The only thing that it does have that is relevant to Doctor Who is the Cybermen. Now, going into this series, I must admit, I did have different expectations as to what I was going to get. What I actually ended up with was good, but I think my expectations were slightly different. I was going into this hoping that it would be a story from the perspective of the Cybermen, and it isn't really that. It's kind of like a typical Doctor Who story, but it doesn't have the Doctor in it. There are certain aspects of this story that are definitely not something that you would ever get in Doctor Who, really, or at least you wouldn't explore as much in Doctor Who, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I liked, on the whole, what I got, but I suppose going into this series, if you haven't heard it already, just be prepared to not have a series specifically about the Cybermen. So basically what this series is, that Earth and humans are at war with androids who have now escaped to a different planet called Orion, and it's this awful, horrible war. The humans are just not winning at all because androids are better in every single way. The situation is getting so desperate that even when a crew of thousands upon thousands of soldiers get butchered because they destroyed a significant amount of androids, that's considered a victory. Like, it is a horrible war, and they established that very early on in the first episode, that the world that we are currently living in, or at least they're currently living in, because I'm not living in it, although we don't have androids yet, but it's a bit fucking weird, isn't it? They established that this world is not a very nice one, basically. And it sort of deals with the behind the scenes politics that goes on in a war like this. However, there is a plan to turn the tide, and this is Project Scorpius. You don't really know what Scorpius is. They don't really establish that early on at all. If you would listen to the title of the actual series, you can pretty much gather what Scorpius is going to be. And from that perspective, I did like that sort of stuff. The first two episodes, I thought, brilliantly expanded upon the characters that we are following throughout this story, which is Karen Brett and Liam, who is one of her best friends and also works under her because she's president. You also have this character called Paul Hunt, who you don't really know too much about. You don't really understand what side he's on because he's a bit ambiguous in that regard, but again, you're kind of trying to figure out who he is, and they kind of do a good job of setting him up and his character. There's a newsreader throughout this who's played by Nicholas Briggs himself. There's even a cameo from David Tennant in like 10 minutes into part 1. It's well weird. But then from like part 3 onwards, this thing just takes a nosedive. It really does. Although maybe not as bad as that, but the first two parts really establish the mystery of everything that is going on with Scorpius. It really establishes the characters, like I just said. It establishes the world, and I think the world building is really good. And it gives you this really interesting conundrum of, okay, Scorpius is, we're going to change the tide by converting humans into Cybermen, but you are probably likely to know that the humans aren't making this decision by themselves. It's obviously the Cyber Planner, or the Cybermen in general, who are implementing this plan, because they're just like, well, if we trick them into thinking that if they turn themselves into us, then they're going to win the war, like, what they're actually doing is giving us more Cybermen. The androids are inconsequential at that point because the Cybermen can just tear through them anyway, so what difference does it really make to them what's happening with this war? So from that aspect, the Cybermen are portrayed really well, but then sort of part 3, like I say, onwards, it just doesn't quite hit the landing that I was hoping for, because you know certain story points are going to happen. You know that once the humans realise what's going on with Scorpius, like, they're going to rebel, or they're going to try and destroy the Cybermen, or they're going to prevent it, all that sort of stuff. It's standard stuff, it's a bit predictable, but it is what it is. However, it gets to a certain point in this where it's just like, I don't care anymore. Liam goes off and does his own thing, and he ends up teaming up with an android known as Sam, and obviously it's the whole thing of a human and an android, opposite sides, teaming up, finding common ground, that sort of thing. It could have been really interesting, but it's not. There's some really awkward moments, and they're not intended to be awkward. There's a moment where Liam partially gets converted in terms of like his mind, not physically, and Sam tries to bring him back by reminding him of human emotions. So they start kissing, and it's really awful to listen to. If it was on screen, it would still be just as bad, but the fact that you can just hear this awful lip smacking to sort of remind this guy of like love and women and horniness and sex and stuff, it's just weird. And then the final showdown with the Cybermen doesn't really feel that epic. And look, it's audio, you have to put your imagination into overdrive to try and picture all these different things, but it doesn't really feel like there's much scale. Something like this could have been really interesting, and you imagine this showdown of like a small crew versus an army of Cybermen, but you never really get that moment. It doesn't really feel epic or grand, and it also doesn't really feel personal either, so it kind of just feels like, well, pointless. The whole stuff with the androids and the human relationship as well, it also seems really, really dumb, and I think that's kind of the point. I think it is to emphasize that, well, you know, they are different to us, but what difference does it make really? And you know what, I can get behind that message, but it's so cack-handedly done in this that it's a bit kind of tedious to a point. Some of the stuff that I do really like in this though is it is linked somewhat to the Sword of Orion, which is a Paul McGann audio, which I have listened to, and that will be, in terms of Big Finish reviews, that'll be my next Big Finish review. There are a few nods to Sword of Orion throughout this entire thing. Obviously Orion itself, the human-android war. In terms of musical cues, there's quite a few of them as well. Like the Cybermen theme in Sword of Orion is also the theme of the Cybermen in this, which I thought was quite cool. Overall though guys, this is worth the listen, I would say, but I wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to go and listen to Series 2. I thought it started off brilliantly, but it just tailed off so quick, and it was so disappointing because, like I say, I was expecting something else, like more like from the perspective of the Cybermen, or like the politics behind the Cybermen and how we became them and all this sort of stuff. And the fact that we didn't get that, I'm totally fine with. But instead, we get an interesting concept that just is almost thrown away for tedious things and awkward moments and characters that start off quite likeable, but then by the end of it you don't really give a shit about, and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's only a 4-part drama as well, so fucking hell, how did they manage that so quick? If you like the Cybermen and you like the whole idea of like a war between androids and humans and the Cybermen getting involved and all that sort of stuff, maybe check it out, maybe you'll like it. Maybe I've been overly negative, because I would still give this like a 6.5 out of 10 overall. I still quite enjoyed it. But in the comments below though guys, let me know what you think. Cyberman Series 1, have you heard it? If you have, what did you think about it? Love it, hate it, regardless, whatever it is, you just let me know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like on it. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always, so if you'd follow me on any of those things, I would absolutely love you forever. But until next time guys, stay fucking indoors. Like, don't go outside, wash your hands, wipe your ass, blow your nose, put on a mask if you need to cough, all that sort of bollocks. Just stay safe. So yeah, till next time guys, I will see you later.